You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Our guest today is Arden Leigh. Arden Leigh is the creator and facilitator of the Repatterning Project, which she describes as a course in understanding the human operating system and repatterning trauma imprints and social conditioning in order to achieve creative freedom. And she is currently enrolling for an 8-week Repatterning Project course, which starts on July 19th, 2020. She also has a band called Arden and the Wolves, which you can find wherever you get your music. And this is a pretty cool conversation. They get pretty deep into things. Arden's joining us over Zoom from her home in Los Angeles. And yeah, this is kind of a long one, but it's worth it. So let's go.
We are speaking with Arden Leigh of the Repatterning Project and many other cool things that we're going to be mentioning a little bit later. So Arden, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and Satch, always good to see you, buddy.
Always good to see you. Yes. And so Arden, our media gal, Tina, came across you or somehow knows you, and she just thought you'd be a cool person for us to have a conversation with, because that's what we do on the show, is we just have awesome conversations with people that have kind of a cool angle. So this will be fun to see where we go. Who knows where we're going to end up?
Yeah. She shared, at first she read a post of yours. I was having dinner with her. It was a recent post that you did about the coaching industry. And I really liked what you had to say. I resonated with quite a lot of it. And
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was well said and a good critique of some of the problems that come up with people's, coaching processes and attitudes and philosophies. And I thought it was just well organized, with what you said. And I concurred about a lot of it, so much so that I copied and pasted that into an NLP and hypnosis learning group that I moderate.
Nice.
That's my background. And
me too.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's awesome. So anyway, then she thought we should interview you, and I think that was a great idea.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It's been a pretty wild journey over the past year, I would say, because I'm a relative newcomer to the structures of the coaching industry. I've worked sort of in and around the coaching industry for a while because I was a dating coach back before my sort of current version of myself, but I never really committed to the business. So when I created the Repatterning Project and I realized, like, I used to joke, I was like I've created this thing that's like the Tesseract. Like, it worked far more. Like, I was just happy that first time I had my little beta launch that I just did for like $4.97 or whatever, I was just happy no one asked for their money back, but then like 6 months later, people the testimonials started coming in, because it's an 8-week course, but it takes a little while for people to integrate and implement the information. So about 6 months after the course, I start getting these testimonials coming in saying, hey, I took Arden's Repatterning Project last summer. It's 6 months later. My life is in a totally different place. Like, I can't believe for the first, one woman, one of the first women to come forward with a testimonial like this basically said, I'm pretty sure that I've permanently shed the suicidal ideation I was dealing with on and off since I was 7 years old. And since I decided that I want to live, I might as well be happy. I decided, to rework my historically tumultuous relationship with my husband. And on top of that, I've decided to, commit to myself as an artist. So I signed up for 4 times as many art shows this year as the year before. And I've already, just this past weekend, in one weekend, I've made as much money selling my art in one weekend as I do in 2 months of my day job. And wow. 6 months later, and I just couldn't be happier. And I was like, holy shit, what did I do? So I started joking, I started referring it to it as the Tesseract, this incredibly powerful thing that I created that I better know how to handle. So that's when I started signing up for business coaching. I was like, all right, I've got the, like, I finally feel like I have the thing that I can commit to, this 8-week, like, step-by-step actionable process for, creating, I don't want to say like creating new beliefs and habits, because that's something that, gets overused in the coaching industry so much, but just essentially calling all, like, Marie Kondoing all of your patterns and your habits, like it brings everything up and you get to look at everything and basically be like, this is working for me and this is really not working for me, even though I thought it was supposed to, and we get to, like, just rewire everything with, like, no shame, like lots of self-compassion, lots of, like, yes, this takes time. Yes, this takes space, and all of, all of that sort of support there, and all that understanding of how difficult the real deep work really can be. And yeah, so then I went into the business coaching kind of thing with, like, and you can imagine me, like, this doe-eyed, like, hi guys, and all of a sudden, and I was someone who, I created this course because I came out of healing and reworking a lot of repressed trauma that I had survived throughout my life, that I just been like, I'm fine, it's whatever, and was naturally, like, getting stored in my body. So so when I finally brought it all up and dealt with it, and I decided to do it in this really super intense kind of, like, well, wow, shit, I guess I better. I was like, it's like that Winston Churchill saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. Like,
Right.
I just decided I was like, I don't want to be stuck in the muck that, for any longer than I have to. So I was like, let's just get this done. Like, give it to me straight. I'm willing to destroy my entire life. I'm willing to cut out anything that is not working for me and completely, just walk forward into the darkness, not even being able to see the hand in front of my face, in order to have belief and faith that something on the other side is going to be better and that I'm going to be able to create something new.
Sounds like
And
an
that's-
initiation.
What's that?
Sounds like an initiation.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge spiritual initiation. Yeah, big time. And so on the other side of that, I was like, I guess I better learn how to run a business. Because, like I said, I'd been sort of in and around the coaching world. I'd worked as a dating coach for Adam Lyons. I wrote a book about my dating coach. I was more of a writer, blogger than I ever really was a coach, because I was good at writing and I knew how to do it, but I didn't really know how to run a business and get clients. And I had trauma around having clients that I didn't even really know was trauma until I, started bringing everything up. So yeah, so there I am in the business coaching world being like, hi guys, like, oh, I'm here, I'm ready. Like, I'm like front row seat, got my VIP ticket. I'm like ready to learn. And I really walked into it, like, in good faith. I was really like, okay, I'm going to start being around people who, like, really know how to make money. I'm going to let go of all my old stories. I'm going to play full out, and I walk into this environment. And what I see is people who don't even know how to hold a container together, amping up the energy in the room, getting people high on emotional conversion, having people up to the mic, sharing these big things, and then, cueing the music to have, like, Alicia Keys, This Girl Is on Fire, and everyone's, woo, yeah, you're going to throw your credit card down, you're done with your old life, and, and it gets to the point where the energy is so high and so tense and so weird, and this dude yells at the audience, and he breaks an easel on stage, throws a flower vase across the room, and decides to stomp through the audience, yelling at us about how, I'm a man with purpose. I'm fucking done playing small. I'm going to throw down my credit card. Here it is right now. And every woman in the room, I mean, many of the men as well, but definitely, like, every woman in the room turns white as a ghost. Because there we were. We had committed. We had signed up. We were like, all right, I'm here. I'm going to play full out. I'm going to do the thing. And then they took us to this space of emotional vulnerability by amping up the energy in the room so hard. And you understand, like, mirror neurons, like, you understand, like, our neural networks are connected like Wi-Fi. So we're all feeling this tension. And all of a sudden it was just these people there's 100 people in this room, and these people do not know how to take care of people. So this guy has this outburst. Everything gets really super awkward. There's, like, a woman who's been fainting at the mic all weekend who starts to go on and on about how there's some big portal opening and we're all in this spiritual bondage and we have this one opportunity to jump through this. Like, no one knows what she's talking about. And the leaders in charge were so out of their element that they know something's wrong, but they don't know what to do. So they put on a Beyonce video and break for lunch. And there's a friend of mine who's there, who's like who's a trauma, like a somatic trauma facilitator guy. And he's like, yeah, I had to Sherpa 7 people through their trauma responses on that lunch break, And so I left and I wrote this thing in the group, and I was just like, listen, and it was an event called Congruent Coach, and which ironically, right? And basically I was like, listen, my being congruent means I'm the creator of the repatterning project. And I grew up in a household with a man who could not control his anger. And I decided that for me, what being congruent means is I am no longer going to run that pattern. So I cannot stay at this event anymore. I paid $1,000 to be here. I paid $1,000 for the privilege of front row exposure to secondary violence. And you want me to hand down $65,000 and you can't even keep a weekend long container together? And this is and you want me to give more money than I frankly ever had in my life to you to help me create a business when you clearly don't even know what the hell you're doing? Absolutely not. So yeah, so that's my feeling about the coaching industry. Is I walked into it, it was almost like that sort of like beginner's eyesight, where it was like, I got to sort of see the naked emperor because I was outside the community and I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, I was just like, all right, there's obviously some useful things here, but there's a lot that's really wrong with it. So yeah, that was my experience with the coaching industry.
Wow.
For sure.
Yeah, that's quite a story. And what I was remarking on internally as you were sharing it is how familiar that sounded, because I've been in the personal growth industry for a while, quite a while. And most of it that's out in the open and is kind of like larger than life. Most of that stuff is very similar to what you described. I went to one where, like you, there was a person up there kind of sharing all sorts of strange stuff. I mean, they were talking about things. I don't even want to get into it. It was just so complicated and convoluted, to be honest. Having to do with believing that they were cursed and poisoned and various lifetimes and dimensions affecting them. And they went on and on for about 2.5 hours. I walked out of the room because the coach decided to show off and do some kind of gestalt, therapy with her. And I just thought, this is just ego here. There's no point to this. We're wasting our time. You took 3 days to convey something that could have been shown to me in 45 minutes. I joke not, like for sure. There's no reason to be doing this. And all it is to draw people into tens of thousands of dollars of coaching programs. And I thought, I don't want to be like you at all. I have no interest in being like you. That's not my style. And so, I'm kind of realizing that there are a lot of personal growth gurus, I guess you could say, self-proclaimed gurus who do approach it that way. And they're not people who I trust. They're not people who I feel comfortable around sharing my personal stuff. I feel like I'm being corralled into a box of some kind rather than understood as an individual. And that's not the way I do my coaching. It sounds like that's not the way you do your coaching. And there are quite a lot of people like us who are out there and don't treat people like that and are thinking about it very differently. They're really off. We're put off by the rah-rah sessions, which I like to call them, because they just don't feel sincere. They don't feel real. I have absolutely nothing against presenting to a large group of people and conveying something important or powerful, and even making money off of that, making a lot of money off of it if it can be done. But I wasn't ever really looking to be a Tony Robbins or to be any of these, larger than life kind of coaches. I want to convey something of value and meaning to people that lasts and that has the ability to be critiqued and has the ability to be tested. It has the ability to check up on people over the course of time to see, hey, have these changes continue to change? Have you gone back? Have you gone forward? Have you expanded? What kind of lateral chunking has happened in this? That's important to me. The real results, not just the results I might get up on a stage or in front of an audience. The perfect demo subjects and all that kind of nonsense. I'm more interested and curious about the complicated and the difficult, because they're the ones that stand out. And that's the bumps in the road that we run into as coaches, is that sooner or later you run into people who are not like the demo subjects that you learned on, and you have to get out there in order to improve yourself. You've got to be able to improv. If you can't improvise, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Unless you get really good at protecting your ego and creating situations where you make excuses for yourself, in a sort of narcissistic way. And
right. Or just put on a Beyonce video and leave.
Cue the Beyonce video,
Yeah, right.
I think that most of us can sense something inside that's a little wrong when we're trying to be sold to. You know what I mean? There's this feeling of I'm being sold to. And I always know what's there. I can always tell when somebody's trying to sell to me, even if I decide to go along with it, but it doesn't feel good. But once in a while you come across somebody or some organization where there's some honesty that they're selling to you, but the feeling behind it is a little bit more, to use your word, congruent with what both sides want, And so it reminds me one time, Carlos, you were talking about affect mismatches.
Mm.
And it was that idea that, it's really important when you're going to connect with another person or with a huge audience of people, for that matter, is to take a moment and realize what is the mood in the room. And you can't just go in there and we're going to take them down, take no prisoners, and you go in with that super enthusiasm, and then it mismatches where everybody else is at, and then you're instantly out of rapport. You know what I mean?
Annoying as fuck.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
So I can tell by the references you've made that you are a sci-fi geek like us.
Yes, I would say so. I'm probably not as much, maybe, perhaps, but I certainly, like, for example, I still have only seen the original Star Wars. I haven't seen any of the newer ones. But
Marvel is included in sci-fi, and you made references.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I definitely have some feelings about, some complicated feelings about Marvel versus DC. I would say I'm currently more of a DC girl.
Okay. So here are the Tesseract references and Matrix references, and we'll see what else comes out.
Excellent.
Yeah, we'll see.
I love that.
We'll be on the lookout.
Yeah. So this is the listen out too.
Yeah.
No, I mentioned DC because one of my mentors writes for DC right now. He's working on the 3-book Wonder Woman series, and I helped to consult on the second book a little bit. So that was an exciting project.
That's neat. Yeah, that's way neat. So, Arden, we've talked a little bit kind of in general, like the outskirts of your repatterning project. Let's take a minute and get into it a little bit more. I think, anybody listening might be a little bit curious as what exactly is it? What is she doing? What are the mechanics of this thing?
Cool. Yeah, man. I've been teaching it for, I guess, 2 years now, twice a year. And I'm, currently enrolling for July 19th is the start of the 5th round. It's an 8-week course with 8 lectures and 8 group calls and a Facebook private group container for like 24/7 support. I jokingly call it the Gifted Kid Program to Enlightenment. Is that basically I break down a lot of material and I put it in a certain actionable order whereby people start to understand how we take on programming in our brains, how our trauma imprints form, how our beliefs form, essentially viewing any of your coping mechanisms with self-forgiveness and self-compassion and understanding what they really were are not faults of your own, but bad solutions to underlying problems that you didn't have the right tools to address at the time, and how these patterns form and how we get invested in them, how we get invested in these faulty algorithms, like if X, then Y, right? Like mine was, if I am valuable to people, right? If I create value for people, then they will treat me well. And that's just not true. It's a faulty algorithm. You could be a priceless painting hanging on the wall of the Louvre, and there's always going to be that asshole who's going to come along and graffiti you just because it's there. So examining all of these beliefs and seeing like where the holes in them are and then replacing them with new ones.
What kind of investment is involved in doing your 8-week program?
Yeah, it's a $2,000 investment,
Okay.
but there are ways of getting around that. There's also the early bird price, which is $1,500, and there's also I gave away 3 activist scholarships this round, so it was $1,000. And you could also, if you were an activist, you could have someone else sponsor you if you want. I put that out there as well. It's essentially the same thing, but if I write it up and I say you can sponsor someone, then someone can go and they can find that, and it can really look, they can help, make that argument more convincingly for why they should, be able to have that sponsor. And I did a thing this year, actually, when the pandemic hit. I opened up a pay what you can container. It was everyone has to make a donation of some kind as a sign of their energy exchange, as a sign of their consent. And I had people who paid $1 and I had people who paid up to $444 and like basically everything in between. You pay anything that you want to be in it, and you can be part of the group and get that group support. And so as I was closing that container, and we closed, just last week, I gave a discount to those folks who had signed up for that program. I said basically like, listen, if you want to join the repatterning project and you want to do like the full deep dive, then you can do it for $1,000 total on a payment plan of like $100 a month for 10 months. Because I knew that the people who had signed up for the pay what you can coaching were the people who were really who wanted and needed that. So that was my inner chaotic good trickster energy.
Yeah.
Saying like, all right, I see you showing up and only being able to pay, like $50 a month for this, and that's fine. It's always whatever you can pay. No one's gonna be turned away for lack of funds. All right, if you can step it up to $100 a month, if you can make that work for you, then you can join this program. So yeah, I like to make it accessible while still valuing it as a $2,000 investment.
That's beautiful. And I will just point out that you made a D&D gaming reference there. So
Dungeons and Dragons reference.
Yeah, the chaotic good, and then there's also mythology reference in there with the trickster.
Yeah.
I'm proving my point here that you definitely.
It's a good point, Carlos. Yeah. Closet sci-fi. Arden, I really appreciate what you did there with your that financial arrangement, because somewhere along the lines, somebody said something to me that transformed my own relationship with money. And the person said, money's just a form of energy. I thought, oh yeah, that's true. And what's important about the exchange of funds is not really the funds, it's the exchange of energy. Yeah. And since money is a form of energy, that's a perfectly acceptable thing to transmit between two people. But what you did there is you required a transfer of energy. And they paid you some of that energy in dollars, and they paid you some of that energy in focus and investment and in commitment and things like that. And that counts too, And then the other thing that happens is it also explains why things sometimes don't work out when we give things away for free, because there does need to be an exchange of energy. And if the other side doesn't, so if I receive something for nothing, I feel like, but I'm supposed to exchange some energy. And then I feel like I can't sustain that. So then I'm going to start to walk away from this free thing. I might enjoy it for a little while, but at some point after a while, it doesn't feel balanced anymore. And both parties can't sustain that, or at least can't sustain it for the long term. But then you have the opposite. $65K on your credit card that's a big exchange of energy, and you have to feel like you're receiving an equal amount of energy back in your life. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was kind of nice, kind of neat that you sort of just, that happened organically.
Thank you. It actually kind of comes a little bit from my background in witchcraft, and I know, I think in our messages back and forth, we're talking a little bit about the intersection of NLP and magic. And for me, that energy exchange is a sign of consent. When I started realizing how powerful magic is, and we can even replace magic with intention setting or whatever. I mean, I'm pretty sure your listeners don't necessarily mind. Yeah. Oh God, manifest. Don't get me started on that, on how that word has been tarnished, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what it is like if someone is coming into my container it's a recognition that they're there of their own free will. And so by, I had someone who was like, oh, I can't make a donation, but you said you wouldn't turn away anyone for a lack of funds. And I was like, I won't. But can you give $1? Or can you find someone else who can give $1 for you? Because it is a sign that you are using your free will to be here. When I started learning magic from the witchcraft tradition that I started studying when I came out to LA, which was, British traditional witchcraft, there was this idea that, essentially doing a spell for someone else is like bind work. It's like messing with their free will. Even if your intentions are good, you don't know what the results of that is going to be, or if they agreed to them. So if someone wants you to do a spell for them, the tradition is like, they spit on a coin and give it to you. It's like just like a quarter or something, and your spit represents your free will, and they give that to you. So obviously I can't have someone spit on a coin if we're, going on a Zoom meeting or whatever, but that idea of that, even if it's $1, says like, okay, that is a sign of your consent that you want to be here out of your own free will, and that you understand that a transformation is going to happen, because I don't ever want to, that's another problem I have with those high pressure, high ticket sales tactics is it's like, who would ever like hard sell someone on ayahuasca? That's evil. That amount of enlightenment, that amount of change and growth and transformation that will happen is something that people have to sign up for out of their own free will, and only their own free will alone. So that for me is the tradition of where that came out of. I want to give people the empowerment to say, even if it is just $1, no, I'm here, and this is the $1 that I'm paying for this entry.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, you heard it here, folks. Only $1 for Arden's course.
Well, I have closed that one now. that was the one where I was like, well, I didn't have anything on the schedule anyway. Yeah. I was in between courses. There's a course I do in fall and spring called Myths and Magic, and we were just wrapping up that one. And it would be summer before we started repatterning project again. So it was like, all right, in the interim, we're all staying home. This is time that I would have maybe done like, other work out in the world. And I was like, well, we're all stuck at home. Let's make something out of this, And it gave me an opportunity to work with people who had maybe been in my free group for a while, where it's a support group, but there's not really any, necessarily coaching from me other than interacting and moderating on the posts and everything. And it gave those people an opportunity to work in a structured container with me that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise. So, and it was great. It was a really rewarding experience.
Very nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very nice. So Arden, what else is on the horizon for you? You said you're writing a book or considering writing a book. Is that something you've started, or is that something you're just planning, or what else might be coming from you in the future?
Yeah, I'm excited about the book. I basically want to put the curriculum into a book format. So I'm feeling, I'm feeling pretty steady on what all that entails now. And it's, it's an 8-week course. So the book will be in, 8 sections, I suppose. And I feel excited. I feel like I'm going to be able to write one of those sections per week as I'm teaching, so I'll be immersed in that material, and I'll be, doing those lectures, and then I'll be able to write out about that lecture because I'll be in that. That's me harnessing the flow state, right? Like I give the lecture, I'm excited about the material, and then I can immediately channel that into a written document is the plan. But I'm also really excited. I'm finally, after a slightly over a year-long hiatus, I'm going back into the studio to work on more music. My band project is called Arden and the Wolves. It's really just me. It's more of, it's a name, but it's a solo project because I hire all my musicians and I hire all my producers. So I'm the creatrix, but there are a lot of other factors that go into that because I'm not an instrumentalist. I'm a singer. So I rely on other people to work with me to put the music together. I always write my melodies and lyrics. And I'm excited about that. That feels like, for me, that's singing and songwriting, and bringing bringing that through into the collective, bringing music through specifically, because music is so personal and can be so potential. You know, you can have more self-help and self-improvement from a 4-minute song that's written in the right way than you can from like a 2-hour lecture sometimes, you know?
That's
so
true.
I'm really excited about that.
Very nice. Yeah. Art's powerful. Very, very powerful.
What would you say some of your primary inspirations have been with the creation of your music?
Oh, that's a great call. I would say, I used to say we were like if Pat Benatar got signed by Fueled by Ramen, which is the label that signed Paramore, Panic at the Disco, I think Fall Out Boy, you know, so if you take that like 80s, Pat Benatar, Bonnie Tyler, even Cyndi Lauper to an extent, that 80s belter, you know, female rock vocal sound, and you update it, you know, with that sort of like emo twist. But then you update it maybe even a little bit further, and you add some sort of dark wave synths to it to bring it into a more contemporary feel, but still having that 80s rock sound and structure. That's about what we're like. So it's been interesting for me because part of my own magical practice is narrative magic. You know, my mentor is Grant Morrison, you know, who's working on the Wonder Woman comic, and I consulted for him on that comic basically for free in exchange for his magical mentorship. So I count myself very lucky. And he is the sort of modern day father of narrative magic. He coined the term hypersigil. And what that is it's essentially using storytelling to manipulate reality, like sympathetic magic, where you create this microcosm of the world. And he did it through comics, and I do it through songwriting. And you write something, and it changes the fabric of reality. So one thing, sorry,
bardic magic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's precisely it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I actually really had to examine was, you know, one of the things that actually was at the root of much of my repatterning was that prior to my repatterning, I was writing a lot of tortured songs. I was writing a lot of tortured love songs, tortured rock songs about, you know, rough sex and whiskey, you know, like that whole lifestyle. And so I changed.
Sleep with one eye open.
What's that?
Sleep with one eye open.
Oh, you've listened. Yes. Yeah. Well, that was interesting. Thank you. I'm very flattered, by the way. That was a narrative working of me purging my trauma, you know. And the end of that EP had to change and had to end in me taking self-responsibility. Like that was a purge of all the. That's interesting. You want to talk narrative magic? You know, that album, Who Can You Trust? I had the whole thing written. It wasn't released until February 2018, but I had the whole thing written and all the vocals recorded and the album art already shot and done by summer 2017. And to have all of that done, and then to have the Me Too movement happen just like in October 2017, it was like, I looked at that and I was like, literally the album is called Who Can You Trust? And there's a man's hands around my neck, you know, and it's this question of like, is he choking me because we're having sex, or is he choking me because it's violence, or is it something in between? And how do we tell, you know? And so the fact that it was like, I wrote that, I'm not crediting myself in narrative magic for the Me Too movement. You know, I think if anything, I added energy to that wave, but just the result of that was really surreal. So I had to ask myself, you know, going forward, I was like, what does my songwriting look like? If I assume that everything that I write comes true, which it tends to, what does it look like for me to write something that's going to be still interesting to listen to, but is not going to condemn me to a life of pain and suffering? So that's been my big inquiry. And so I'm writing a full-length album that's essentially about spiritual growth via the twin flame initiation. You know, this idea of the mirror polarity of attracting someone who mirrors your exact issues to you and working through that so that you can reach that point of sacred union. So it's a big leap of faith on my part, because I'm essentially saying like, okay, I'm hypersigilizing for my sacred partner, you know, my sacred union partner, and starting the writing and recording of this album, not really fully knowing where it would take me, but having that leap of faith to be like, I trust that this is going to be a transformative process. And by the time I put it out, that I'll have the result there. So that's been That's been a
Interesting.
wild journey in and of itself.
Wow, you're songwriting a future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
songwriting a
And I would
future.
argue that like
Nice.
any of us like who are artists, any of us who are putting that kind of work out into the world, I think, we are creating our future whether we realize it or not. That was what my mentor Grant taught. Essentially, he wrote a comic called The Invisibles, and he noticed that everything he was having happen to his main character would happen to himself on like maybe like a 3 to 6 month delay. So he was like, yeah, so I after getting out of the hospital with busted lungs and pneumonia, which is exactly the ordeal I'd put my character through, I thought, well, why don't I give him an easy thing? Why don't I just get him laid, give him a hot girlfriend?
Exactly.
And he was like, and it worked. All of a sudden, all these girls are showing up in my life who look exactly like the woman in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we create our reality far more than we understand that we're responsible for. And that's what I aim to teach in the repatterning project, the nuts and bolts of it. And then my course, Myths and Magic, that I run in fall and spring, is the sort of right-brained approach to that, which is about using the power of narrative and archetype to create a reality as well.
I love it. This is why I love tarot study so much. Working with the tarot and understanding the tarot in the way that I do, it's a very magical process. There's lots of psychological elements to it, but I mean, it's really a spiritual path that I don't personally believe that ends. It's not like, oh, I know tarot and that's it. Like I'm a master of tarot. It's more like, well, I've been studying it for many, many years, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I might be able to share some insights that I have gained along the way, but it's a continuing journey. Just like, moving, through the tarot trumps from the Fool all the way through the whole wheel of all the cards. I mean, each of those things, they are narratives, they're stories, they're pictures that contain ideas, and we move through them archetypally through our lives, and we experience the world through those filters, and it changes our reality just by looking for those things. It's the observational creation element that I love, and what you're talking about just kind of aligns with that same idea so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. I once upon a time, I found myself having to go to the DMV. And it was an emergency. I had to go to the DMV that day. I took a day off because my license was going to expire and everything. Long story short, I kid you not, I spent 12 or 13 hours at the DMV that day.
Oh my God.
The line was out of the building, out into the parking lot. And the only thing I had with me was some paper and a pen. And I once I got checked in, I literally had to sit up against a wall all day long and just wait to get called to this particular window. Then once I went to that window, I went and sat back down against the wall and waited another 5 hours to get called to another window. And it was just, that's how the day was.
If you called me, I would have brought you lunch.
I know, should have. So I spent the entire day drawing a picture. And this picture that I drew was me creating what I wanted in at least my near future, or not too distant future. And reflecting back on that, I think that was one of the most transformative days in my life, because I had nothing else to do all day long. There wasn't anything else to read. There wasn't anything else. I was stuck with just me and paper and pen, and created powerful images and really fueled those images with connecting with the emotion that I wanted. And looking back, I think a lot of wonderful transformations came from that picture.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so to me, that was sort of my version of magic and creating a future. It was gave me an excuse to fantasize about what I wanted all day.
Like vision board.
And
Wow.
it was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome.
I just love the fact that it's like, talk about harnessing the flow state where you're basically like, I'm in this container, so to speak. It's kind of a miserable container, to be in, but here are the tools that I have at my disposal. I have paper and pen, and from these very simple tools, I'm going to use this space and time that I've been given to create something bigger. I mean, holy shit, that's incredibly powerful magic.
Yeah, thank you. And and I learned a lot that day looking around. Some people were really happy and made the best of the day. And some people were just miserable and furious and complained and had to go up to the window again. And you know what I mean? I just realized, wow, everybody's sharing their misery, or everybody's just sharing their contentment. So what am I going to create right now?
It's Viktor Frankl all over again,
Hey, yeah.
Yes!
Yeah. Good Viktor Frankl stuff. Yeah. There you go. Good reference. Yeah.
I talk about a little bit of the Viktor Frankl stuff in week 3 of the course too.
Oh, you
We
do?
talk about
Nice.
talk about refeeding syndrome. That was my big takeaway from Viktor Frankl.
Mm-hmm.
Someone bought me the audio book as a gift.
Nice.
And I'm not gonna lie, I only got about halfway through it because it was starting to really bum me out. And I understand like the privilege of getting to be bummed out by an audiobook about the Holocaust, but I get that.
Yeah.
But the thing I really took from it was this idea that the most powerful takeaway that I had was that some people who were rescued from the camps that they'd been in, they survived the camps and they survived up until their rescue. And then something happened called refeeding syndrome, where they ate and drank too quickly and it put them into liver shock. And they passed away from the fact that they didn't, that they didn't go slowly enough in getting their body to a place where it could accept that form of nourishment again. And that for me was a huge metaphor for trauma, and people who try to make those quantum leaps, quote unquote, which by the way, the quantum leap is still on my website. I put it there 2 years ago before it came to mean like, be Icarus flying too close to the sun, so I have to change that now that it's come to mean something else. But people who want to make those big changes don't understand necessarily that even things that we're supposed to want in limitless quantities, such as financial abundance or love or money or happiness or whatever, can be a shock to our systems if our systems are not ready for it. What is more nourishing for us than food when we're starving? But if we overdo it and we take too much in, then it's going to put our systems into shock and ultimately, harm or perhaps even kill us. So that was my big takeaway from Viktor Frankl, was a big critique of the coaching industry.
Wow.
My marketing is, I'm very left-brained, as I grew up on the East Coast. I was not into the woo at all. I came at it from that NLP angle, which was very masculinized. I was in a sort of, I was in the pickup artist industry. I was into NLP as something that you could use as a tool, as a tactic. But not as something that was going to change you from the inside, until that happened to me. And what I essentially discovered is I was like, look, I don't want the woo-woo people who because I looked at the clock and it said 11:11, that means that he's my twin flame, or I want people who want evidence. I want people who are critical thinkers. I want people who are open-minded skeptics, people who are like, I am willing to take a leap of faith and see if this works. But don't ask me to believe anything, until I see, or ask me to believe that thing, but then allow me to be realistic in my assessment of whether changing that belief has actually worked for me. Right? That's really more accurate about it. Like believe that it will work, but make sure that it actually does. Like look at your results.
Yeah, nicely said. Yeah, nicely said.
She said one of our buzzwords, Satch.
She did. I know. We both noticed it. You said open-minded skeptics. Or skepticism.
Yes, that's one of my buzzwords too.
We've been promoting that phrase on our show, like from before we ever had a show.
Yeah.
So we love
Great.
that.
What amazing synchronicity.
It's a great way to approach life. To be open to everything and skeptical of. Yeah, it's great. That's great.
I thought maybe the three of us could talk about this too, and I'm interested in your perspective, Arden. Let's wax spiritual, let's wax poetic, let's wax inspirationally here. And let's just, not leave our critical thinking caps off, but let's just incorporate,
loosen them a little bit for the sake of seeing.
Let's open up, because you mentioned something that is a deep, deep search in my heart and in my soul and my mind. You mentioned the idea of twin flame, and I realized that in recent years, people have become uh, maybe they've started in popular culture. I say popular, it's still a subgroup of people who have even think about this kind of thing. But within that subgroup, there's a popular idea that a twin flame means X and a soulmate means Y. And it used to be that wasn't really very well defined. It was kind of like they were the same thing. And so I think it's arbitrary that people make this separation. But let's just talk about what our impressions are of those things. And even if it's something real, or is it metaphorical? Is it something, you know what I mean? I want to talk about that for a sec.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, and I'm going to try and the twin flame path, when it showed up for me, it took me almost a year from the time I heard the term to accept that it was real and that it was something that was happening for me. Because again, coming from that background of skepticism, and with there being so much misinformation out there about twin flames and what it means, and with it being so entangled with codependence, because it essentially is an initiation that leads you out of codependence. But because of that, it gets stuck in that mud sometimes, and there's a lot of misinterpretation of it. So it took me from the time it happened to about the time that I hacked it, that I figured it out, that I understood what it was. It was about 4 years. So that was a long time. So it's and it ends up being actually a very simple concept, but getting to that place was, and swimming through all of the misinformation and all the codependence riddled anecdotes on the internet was quite a process. And I had to learn about it through my own experience. So what the twin flame path essentially is, as I've understood it is a mathematical equation. And it is based in ontological mathematics that I'm currently learning about ontological mathematics through my friend Morg's book right now. My friend Morg has a book titled Ontological Mathematics. And as I'm reading it, I'm realizing that all of this has shown up for me in the twin flame initiation. And now I'm seeing it translated. And essentially what it is it's the law of polarity. So let's imagine you have a circle, right? And let's imagine that it is a color wheel, right? So we'll imagine like a rainbow circle, essentially, right? And that this represents the spectrum of everything that is in existence. Well, your twin flame is your mirror image. So everything that is going on within yourself is going on in your twin flame. You're basically the 2 points on that circle, on that color wheel of infinite possibility that are exactly 180 degrees apart. So we'll take, for example, like the big polarity in relationships, and there's more polarities than these, but the big one is attachment styles, right? On the one hand, you have anxious attachment, someone who wants to be closer. And on the other hand, you have avoidant attachment, someone who is afraid of being close and wants to pull away. And so wherever you are at that point in time, if you call in a person who is your twin flame, it is a mathematical equation that reflects exactly where you are at on your own spectrum of polarities. And so if I am, let's imagine an algebraic number line, right? And let's say that on the one hand, we have it going from 1 to 10. And on the other hand, we have it going from 0 to 10, right? Because 0 is the center, 0 is the 0 point, right? The non-point, the nothing. And then we have, on the other hand, it goes from 0 to negative 10, right? And let's imagine on this number line that, that the positive side we'll say is avoidant attachment, and the negative side is anxious attachment, right? So if I'm a negative 7.5, the person I attract from that place is going to be a positive 7.5, right? Because everything is going to mirror me, and everything is going to line up in that same way. We also have polarities of trauma responses, right? We have desensitization on the one hand, right? The inability to feel our body's signals warning us. And on the other hand, we have hyperarousal, our body's signals going off all the time, right? And we will attract people who mirror these polarities within us. And the point of that is that when we call in that person and when we see that, where people get really stuck on it is that they believe that, like, the trap is that they fall into codependence and they fall into believing that it's really about the other person and that it's about, getting into that relationship with that person. But if they're coming at it from that same point on that polarity, it's never going to work. Those two opposites are going to repel each other, right? Because you know what happens when you have a relationship between an anxiously attached and an avoidantly attached person. It can be very passionate. There can be a lot of chemistry, but it's not sustainable. The two elements will not actually work together because it's being fueled by this resistance, right? By these codependent polarities. So the goal is to see everything that your twin flame reflects into you and to move closer on that number line to the 0 point of secure attachment. And here's where people get messed up. People really believe like, oh, you just have this one twin flame. And so therefore your chance of experiencing sacred union, right? The 0 point, both of you coming together to that 0 point in the center. They believe that is dependent on the cooperation of the person who shows up as their twin. And what I proved, and I'll explain how I proved this too, what I proved is that you cannot control another person's free will, right? I mean, we know this, right? So you cannot hack unconditional love if you believe that your sacred union is dependent on coming through the person who is mirroring you at that point in that polarity. And your job as a twin flame who is aiming to achieve that point of sacred union. And again, this is what I'm writing my album about. So I've been in this, right? I've been working through this myself. Your responsibility to yourself is to get yourself toward that secure attachment point by seeing the polarities that they mirror within you and fixing that within yourself and moving toward that point of secure attachment. And if they move with you, that's great. And oftentimes, because you trigger each other and because you cause that mirrored growth and that seeing, that recognition within each other, that will often happen. But at the end of the day, you can't control a person's free will, right? So what you have to do is keep moving yourself toward that point of secure attachment. And when you reach that 0 point, then you're going to attract that person who is also at that 0 point as well. And that's when you have that sacred union. So people who talk about twin flames versus soulmates, we can have a lot of soulmates, right? We can have a lot of people who really connect with us and support our growth, who we feel that feeling of familiarity, of family with. And yet the twin flame, people are like, oh, you can only have one twin flame because it is that mirrored polarity. They are your mirror. They are your opposite. And not everyone is going to show you that mirrored growth and that equation of that polarity, right? But the trouble is that they forgot to solve for the element of time. Because as we understand from people like Joe Dispenza and from people who are teaching this work, we can do our own mindset work and our own growth work to change where we're at and move from that point of that negative 7.5 on the polarity scale. We can change that through our habits and our beliefs, and we can move toward that point of 0, that 0 point of secure attachment. And whether that other person does that or not is not something we can control. So that was the big question for me. I was like, if the twin flame path is about hacking unconditional love, and yet my sacred union is dependent on the cooperation of my twin flame, who is here in a human incarnate form, how can I have unconditional love if my happiness is dependent on them? So that's what I solved, is that it's essentially they forgot to solve for the fourth element of time and understanding that as we move toward that 0 point, then the twin that we are going to attract via that mathematical equation might show up in a different flesh suit, right? So I know that was a lot, but that's essentially, that took me 4 years.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, I love that.
That was awesome. Yeah. And we're expecting it to be all spiritual. And it turns out it was math, Carlos, the whole time. It was math.
Yeah. Well, neither one of you or I are math.
I know.
Math is so beautiful. The harmony of math, right?
There's a distance between that star and, it's time, right? It's okay.
But I'd love to tell you the story if you're open to it of how I discovered this.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm working through my album, right? I finished Who Can You Trust, which was my narrative working of trauma healing, right? So I purged all my trauma. I purged all my issues with men, right? I got that all out of my system. And then I said, okay, what do I want next? Well, I want my sacred union. I want my relationship. So considering that all of my songs had come true, right? The Me Too movement happened and everything, all of that purged in me, right? I was like, all right, well, I better take self-responsibility for what I write. So the next song I wrote is a song called Eclipse Life. And it's basically about, it is about meeting, your twin flame, meeting your sacred partner. And it was based on events that had happened to me in my real life with a man who I met on the night of an eclipse. And I met him at this party in Los Angeles that was called Cloak and Dagger. And so it's like this party that happens in LA on Tuesday nights, and it's this like kind of goth party. It was, it was super cool. It's kind of imploded since then, but it was the night of an eclipse, and I was at Cloak and Dagger, and I meet this guy, and it's instant chemistry, and we go home with each other the same night, and then my awakening happens, the mirror shows me where I have my growth to do, and holy shit, I'm just on this big thing. So eclipses, as you may know from magic, are times of intense transformation. So I decided to use this as a metaphor in the song, right? That the sun and the moon, at the point in which the masculine and feminine polarities meet in the sky, creates this time of intense transformation, this gateway that you can enter through. So the song is called Eclipse Life. And I wanted to make sure, I was like, I don't want to write this song about this dude because I don't want to bind anyone's free will. If he decides he is not my sacred partner, then that's up to him. So I was like, well, I'll write this song and I'll keep it vague enough that like he's the placeholder, right? Like he's the person that maybe inspired this in me, but I'm not going to use any specific characteristics about him. I'm just going to write this song in this big archetype so that someone else can easily step into the story so that I'm not binding his free will. The one thing I did put in it, aside from the eclipse, was there was a lyric that kind of came to me with the word cloak in it, which was the name of the party. There's a lyric like stars, we were cloaked in darkness. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Cloak. All right. We met at Cloak. Okay. I'll throw that in there, just to be cheeky. It's a little reference, but it's still not binding the dude, it's just a detail that happened to happen. Well, I write that song and then some time goes by and I'm clearly moving myself toward the 0 point of secure attachment. I'm doing that work. And this guy, he's doing work on himself too, but it reaches a point of resistance. It reaches a point where I was like, I can't deal with this person being avoidant with me anymore. This is no longer in alignment with me and how I want to be treated. So I wrote a song like letting him go. I wrote a song like releasing him. And it was just like, maybe we'll meet up sometime in the future, whatever. It is what it is. 4 days later, I met a man who would become my next partner after writing that song, releasing this other guy, right? And I start seeing things on my Facebook feed start to come up about the twin flame path. And people are talking about how like, your twin flame is not limited to one person. It's this, it's that. And it's like, and at this point, this is before I had sort of understood the formula, right? And I was just like, no, universe. I know what you're trying to say. And no, this doesn't make any sense. How can your twin flame just be anyone? Like what no, I thought you're supposed to have many soulmates and only one twin. And this doesn't make any sense. Like my twin is my twin. And this person who's showing up for me is like a soulmate meant to like raise my vibration in the meantime. Surely that must be what it is, right? Because besides, I met my twin on the night of an eclipse at Cloak and Dagger, right? I met him on the night of an eclipse. That's like the most twin flame thing ever. And then I realized, and this person that I ended up dating for a while, this new person who had come into my life was long distance. He lived in Italy. He had booked his flight. He was going to come over and we made a music video together as sort of like, we made an excuse of an art project so that we could meet and have a reason for meeting. We ended up dating for the rest of that year. And I realized, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, eclipse season is coming up again. Let me check his flight. So I go and I check the date of his flight. And his flight lands at 11:59 p.m. on the night of the eclipse. And it was a Tuesday, which is the night of Cloak and Dagger. So his flight lands and I pick him up at the airport. And we've been corresponding for about 2 months at this point. And there's obviously, there's obviously a lot of like tension in a good way. I was nervous about meeting him naturally. And I said to him, I was like, you've been traveling for almost 24 hours straight. Are you exhausted? Do you want to go straight to the Airbnb? Are you hungry? Do you want to get something to eat? And he goes, fuck it, let's go for a drink. And we're both wearing black because Cloak and Dagger has an all black dress code. Just, and I'm fairly goth, so I wear a lot of black anyway, but he wouldn't have known that, So he's like, let's go for a drink. And I took him to Cloak and Dagger. So sure enough, it was the night of an eclipse. We're at Cloak and Dagger, and then we went home with each other that same night. Everything happened exactly in the same way as the first thing did that I wrote about. And everything that I kept from that interaction that I wrote about in the song and said, well, this dude is just going to be the placeholder, but I'm going to write about this phenomenon. It happened again exactly as it was. And I didn't even choose the date that this guy, flew in, right? Like he booked his own ticket. This was something I had no say over whatsoever. But the fact that it could happen exactly as it had before. So magic is real.
There are a lot of synchronicities. I can understand why that had such a profound impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It
Absolutely.
basically showed me that, I don't have to rely on a specific person. And I'm single right now, but I don't feel weird about that because I know that I'm moving toward that 0 point and that I'm closer than I have ever been before. So now I'm just kind of like, okay, great. Like I'm great. Send me the next one.
Nice. Now for number 64. I'm currently exploring a mindset around this, which is open-mindedly skeptical about the whole idea. I have, for as long as I can remember, and I can remember all the way back, pretty much to pre-verbal days, because of trauma, probably. Being a person centered in the heart and being a highly sensitive, empathic type of person who has since learned to develop compassion out of that empathy, but who is a deeply romantic soul, someone who has held an irrational but meaningful belief in loving and who practices loving. I wanted to believe, probably still want to believe at some level, that there is such a thing. Because it's a beautiful idea, it's an inspiring idea, it's an idea that moves me. But I recognize that there are so many presuppositions in the idea itself, unverified things and leaps of logic that are required, knowledge we don't really have, that are based on ideas, theories, summations of what we think creation really was, but we really don't know.
Well, I'm curious about that. Unpack that more for me.
Yeah. So,
because I listen to you and I want to be like, but wait, love is an irrational belief in love, but love is the most rational thing. Love is the most sustainable energy, right?
Yeah. So,
but go on. I'm curious about that.
Absolutely. So from a feeling standpoint, that's very true. From a rational thinking mindset, I can only look at the benefits of it or the problems with it. Either way, I can look at it scientifically, I can look at it socially, I can look at it psychologically, I can look at it in terms of relationships and how it affects relationships. But at the end of the day, there's so much we don't know. So it isn't really rational in the sense that it's understandable fully. It's not something you can put into an exact equation without summing it all up in a way that's so generalized that it becomes a nominalization. As we know from NLP, words like love are nominalizations. They're process words. They're things that are talking about feeling processes, and they really can't be defined so easily, if at all. And so in each and every case, when you talk to someone about love, you have to find out what they mean in that specific context, and that may even change 5 minutes later. So it isn't really very precise. And so there are a lot of presuppositions that are necessary in order to even talk about it. So whenever we talk about love, it's probably going to be a poetic and inspired conversation involving a lot of trance states. So I recognize that. And in those trance states, your imagination can create all sorts of sparkles or darkness, depending on the moment and the frame. And to unpack the idea about the universe, we don't actually know how we were created. We only know that we have reverse engineered our way through astrophysics and so forth to theorize how things began. But I mean, you used a word which is perfectly adequate. You said from nothing, nothingness, right? What is nothingness? Was it potentiality? Was that nothingness containing all possibilities? We don't really know. It's philosophy is what I'm saying. And I'm a philosophical person. I'm a deeply philosophical soul. There's no question in that. I'm just stepping outside of myself and back in myself, and stepping out of myself and stepping back in myself to understand what we're talking about. I don't claim to know it. I just am making an effort through this discussion, this open-ended discussion, to try to understand how I feel about it and what my experience of it is by this dialectic, by understanding your point of view, Arden, and by understanding your point of view, Satch. Satch knows that him and I have talked about love so much because him and I are very loving people, and we love each other deeply, his brothers. So like we share things at a really vulnerable level. I mean, the things that wound us, the things that inspire us. And I feel like this show is about that. It's an extension of that. You're invited into this triangle, I guess you could say, of exploration. So it used to be that soulmate to me just meant the person you were meant to be with according to fate, destiny, God, whatever you want to say. That this was the person who you'd been waiting for all your life, that they could participate in their own growth and your growth and the growth of your relationship in a way that was, let's say, mostly positive, that was beneficial. That yes, you might have little hitches along the way that need to be worked out, but there was a faith. This was a secure attachment, to use the term you used earlier, that you both grow from, and that creates a foundation for you to have a certain level of freedom, because there's no such thing as total freedom, but a certain level of freedom. Just as you can live out your will, the sort of deep genius that exists within your consciousness, that deep genius which is somewhat formless until it forms, and is continually arising out of that formlessness, much in the way that we talked about the universe forming out of nothing, but really it's potentiality. I sense that is what's happening. And for me, twin flame became a differentiation from soulmate only because people said so. But to me, it's just another way of saying the same thing, that I could refer to a soulmate just like I could refer to a friend. But then there's, for me personally, when I define a best friend, there's gradations of meaning depending on the context. If at that moment I cannot conceive of any deeper love, any grander love, except leaning into the unknown, then that person is everything that is my focus. It is my single point of loving that represents for me what I would call a soulmate or a twin soul or the person I'm meant to be with or whatever it is. If that changes, I'm not going to fault myself or that other person for that. If it was sincere, if it was genuine, if it just happened to be that things, our paths moved apart, or we entered into blocks that were not that we weren't able to resolve together. At that point, we make a kind choice, a loving choice to love ourselves and to love the other person and respect what we had and to end it lovingly. That's so fucking rare that you could end it lovingly, even though it's a great intention. I want this, but I find it doesn't happen very often. So I hope with all of my being that I can continue to experience love at the highest and grandest levels, at the deepest levels. It's important to me. I spend time and energy leaning in and applying myself to having that and to digging deep within myself to love more. And at the same time, because of what I do in my education, I also look at all the codependent shit and all of the expectations and all the things that can get in the way of loving unconditionally. I don't even know if it's possible to be a human being and to love unconditionally. I don't even know. I just know it's a great thing to aim for. It's a good, it's a healthy, I feel, an inspiring thing to continue to aspire towards, because it brings out your noblest qualities. And when you occasionally, or I occasionally, get into an overwhelm of whether it be stress or trauma or stuff, we're not operating at that highest level. So it helps to have something to shoot for. It helps to have the rules on the wall kind of thing to look at, like to go, oh yeah, take a deep breath. It's okay. This is where I'm aiming. Just keep reapplying. And that to me is as close to perfection as you can get, because there's no such thing as perfection. But as close as you can get is to go, those are my ideals. They're chosen wisely. And I really want that. And I'm willing to spend my energy getting it. That's how I feel about love and soulmates and twin souls and all that stuff. I want it deeply and I don't understand it.
My understanding of unconditional love is that it's essentially rooted in non-attachment, right? What it means for me is that I don't want anything that I have to force or that I have to convince. My last breakup with the man from Italy who showed up on the night of the eclipse, we were in this harmony for a while, and then we reached a point, where we were both growing, and we reached a point where he said, "Hold up, I got stuff I got to take care of. I got to get my money situation in order. I got to get, I got to make a leap in my career. I got to figure out, some things for myself." And so he wasn't ready to grow with me toward closing that gap. And naturally there's grief around that, but my understanding of unconditional love, and especially as I understand it in the formula, is like, I am willing to let him go and do that, and to understand, I might not agree with his decision that he wants to do that work without a partner, right? I might think, well, I think you'd be better off if you did that while staying in relationship with me, because we can be supportive of one another. It doesn't matter. That's just my personal opinion.
Right.
But unconditional love comes in as I say, okay, and it's also unconditional love for myself, because what I'm saying is, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to let you do the thing that you need to do, because I don't want to have to convince you to be with me. Because the minute I fall into that energy of convincing, then I'm trying to force something that doesn't want to naturally happen. And I love myself enough to say, I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep going on this journey, and I'm going to keep closing that gap toward that 0 point. And I'm going to trust that the person who then mirrors those polarities, who is then the result of that algorithm based on a mirror image of where I'm at, is going to show up for me. And that I don't ever put the onus on any one human person to be the form in which my sacred partner shows up in, that I could be deep in a relationship with someone, and we could be right here the whole time. But then the idea is that time allows for change, right? We can change. Like, that's the idea of us each being individual creators. That yes, we can step into this relationship and we can be on track in that relationship that can guide us forward through time with this structure and this framework that allows us to continue mirroring one another. But if someone falls away from that too much because either other things are going on in their life, or just they make their own human free will choice to not continue aligning, because we all have free will, unconditional love to me is just like not forcing alignment when alignment is not happening, and trusting that by me taking self-responsibility and having my own ducks in order, that other person who is going to be in alignment is going to show up, and not to have to hang on to someone. So, and the mistake I think people make, like you brought up, you said, sometimes things end, and can you not beat yourself up for like, oh, I thought this was my soulmate, but they're not. It's we always attract from right where we're at, right? So it's about quantum time. It's about the fact that at one point in time, we can attract a certain person, and that certain person can also attract us, because we're in that, we fit the equation, right? We're mirroring one another. We're at that same place of growth. But that due to free will, we can fall out of that equation. We can fall out of that balance by either of us making, the choices that we make in our lives. And that when that happens, we don't look back at that and say, oh, that wasn't my soulmate. She clearly wasn't the one. It's no, that was what I was mirroring at that time. So that was perfect. But time makes changes in us. So who I am now is not the same as who I was 3 years ago. So who I'm going to attract is going to be different too, you know? And our hope is that we attract that person that we then settle into that track, right? That structure of relationship that helps us that we build together and we grow and we move forward and we continue that mirroring of one another, and we continue to be in that and to feed that and support and nurture that growth. But that understanding that if it falls apart, it's just because now is a different time than then was, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's how I do it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And what you're saying about unconditional love, I concur. It's more of like, I think I went meta in my description a bit, looking at it from a standpoint of ultimately what words mean. But I recognize that within the personal perspective of human to human relating, there is such a thing, of course, as really feeling like you have no agenda, or that you don't want to force your will upon someone else, that you can allow them to exit even though you would prefer they didn't. I think there are gradations of desire because non-attachment is a buzzword that can be, I think, overused or misused quite a lot, because there's no such thing as true non-attachment unless you have no desires at all, because attachments are related to desires. You know, when you desire something, there's an attachment to having it at some level. It just may not be as sticky of an attachment. It may not be as a heavy or entangled form of attachment, but it's still an attachment, you know, until you go, oh, you know what? I realize I'm holding on emotionally to having that. Because if you were non-attached, you would just literally let people walk in your door and take whatever they want and do whatever they wanted to you. There's no such thing unless you're absolutely fucking nuts, like you've lost sanity. But there is such a thing as having flexibility and adjusting and recognizing contextual applications of things like that. Like, yeah, it's great to then reflect and go, wow, you know what? I am attached to this person. And I also need to be very aware that if they choose not to be with me, that's their choice, and I'm going to need to step back. But does that mean then later on I'm not allowed or supposed to, quote unquote, feel like crying my eyes out when it ends, or that I'm supposed to feel like totally at peace with the fact that they've moved on? No, like that's not human. There's an animal portion of us that is bonding, that becomes attached. It's just, how entangled are you? Like, there's a form of entanglement that is, I feel, natural, and a form of entanglement that is the result of deeply abused patterns, from being abused and not really learning how to develop higher emotions and flexibility and resilience. That can interfere because of childhood trauma and all sorts of things in our lives, learnings, so to speak. And you can evolve to become a person who can do both, I feel, where you can, on the one hand, be very, very committed into something, and not like, hey, I got one foot out the door because, you know, I'm unattached. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not the same thing as investing fully in something. It's almost like, I put it this way a few times in my life. It's a fun game in a way to transform things into games, right? That's what I do to help me with difficulty.
Nice.
And I feel like, how present can I be? Like, can I be more present than the last time? Or if I were to look at this other person in the relationship, are they capable of being as present with me in this as I am? Typically, I don't find that to be the case, but I've always been seeking that, you know, person who can be, because incredible magic happens the more present you are together. There's such a polarity, there's such energy. If you want to talk magic, holy shit. So much synchronicity, so much magic happens when two loving souls who are more awake than most people come together, literally and figuratively, and end up expanding consciousness in that presence. That is fucking potent. So anyway.
Yeah.
Gosh, Carlos, I was listening deeply to what you were saying, and you know, you and I have known each other for so long, you know, that sometimes I think I can hear things in what you're saying, and you can hear things in what I'm saying that maybe the other average person might not, you know. a couple of things come to mind about what you were sharing there. One thing is that humans are still evolving, right? We're the three of us are not the endpoint of where humanity is going.
Right.
So it's perfectly okay to expect more out of love and relationships and connection, right? Because we're manifesting evolution of our species, right? So, brother, man, you keep doing it. Keep expecting it. You know what I mean? It's great. It's awesome. Keep pushing and causing love to cause us to evolve, right? I think that's something that I wanted to say. The other thing is that sometimes I think we need to reassign our meanings to what we put on things like heartbreak, or loss. You and I are both aware of the heartbreaks and losses that we've experienced, and they are what they are, and they hurt. At the same time, we can reassign meaning to that. I remember one day, I always find myself gaining insights when I'm stuck in a situation, like when I was stuck at the DMV. I was once stuck on campus during an accreditation visit in a room, and I couldn't go anywhere. So what did I do while everybody else was working? I decided to read Rumi poetry, right? And it's my style. It's how I roll. And something, I read just what I needed, which was when you're in pain over something, and I'm paraphrasing because right, Rumi didn't write his stuff in English anyway. Okay, so it's okay to paraphrase Rumi. He said, if you look deeply at what it is that's causing you pain, you realize that it's because that's the thing that gave you the most joy. And and that's what I mean about reassigning the meaning to these things. Two beings come together. There's love, attachment, bonding, and that's good bonding. And then those two beings come apart. Maybe one of those beings wants to come apart more than the other, right? Or maybe they repel each other all of a sudden, right? We can think carefully about the meaning behind that. Like our mutual friend James Key, who was a guest on our show, Arden, by the way.
Nice.
He shared a story once, and it wasn't on his episode. It was some other time where he said that, remember, Carlos, he shared that story with a friend. He was friends with a couple, and the couple was going to be leaving the country and traveling all around the world. And he was starting to withdraw from the friendship because he was anticipating the pain of their separation.
Right.
And his friend reminded him, he said, hey, look, he said, let's build towards a bigger pain. If we do, if we do this right, let's dive in even more. It should hurt when we say goodbye. So we could put more, we could change the meaning about that. It's okay for it. It should fucking hurt, right? If you did it right, you know, I mean, that's just
so
another
good.
way of looking at it. Yeah. Come on, baby, make it hurt so good. Sometimes love don't feel like it should, right? Hurt so good. I don't know. That's just kind of what I felt like sharing about that.
Ram Dass once said, Richard Alpert Ram Dass, I just love the guy. But he said, if you're still feeling attachment or aversion, then there's work to do. But that doesn't imply, like, that statement doesn't stand all by itself without any context. I mean, he lectured on and on about things, and quite clever things that he put, and they were always within a certain context. So when you take a meme like that and just kind of put it up and post it on Facebook or whatever it is you do, it forgets all the context. So yes, there's work to do, but what kind of work? And what does work mean? So, and what is attachment and what is aversion? So we know from Buddhism and from meditation what that means for us. Just because you're doing work on something doesn't mean it's bad or something to be avoided. That's an aversion. Avoiding aversion is still an aversion.
Yes.
So, so
it's being attached to being comfortable, right?
Yeah. And I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that anything that matters to me is going to have a mix of positive and negative feelings attached to it. And I'm okay with that. Like a relationship, even just if everything was going so beautifully between me and another human being that I'm sharing love with, there's probably going to be moments when I think, oh my God, what if this ends? Or what if they don't come back, they go and get in a car accident? Or what happens if one of us gets sick? Or what happens if, right? That's not using the imagination in a positive way. It's abusing the imagination because I'm doing it, but it's human to do that, to fear loss. So I guess I understand that there's always work to be done. I don't look at it as like some kind of sannyasi in orange robes and say, oh, well, I'm not going to be attached to things. No way. I'm here to experience the world, to live fully. And I want to die fully as well. I want to be as present as I can when I die. And I don't want to be detached from the world except to say that I'm more and more detached from the old patterns which were holding me down. And in that way, I want to practice unattachment. The things that are entangling me from expressing my fullest, highest ideals, then definitely I want to disentangle myself from those things for sure. But I like that I care about the world. I like that I care about other human beings and myself. I like that I love loving. I like that I love being in love. That's important to me. And I don't think I'll ever change that. But I have no interest in changing that. But I am interested in continuing to grow and be healthier. I am interested in creating more and more security and attachment forms that are mutually beneficial, as I have with my best friends. I mean, Satch and I know, we have a tight group of brothers and sisters now too. But some of these friends we've known for decades. One of them I've known for 40 years, more than 40 years. So I know what it means to have secure attachments. I know what that means. And I just got to figure out how to apply that towards romantic love.
Yeah.
Somehow.
My understanding of non-attachment, or at least I should say my personal practice of it, is that I am certainly allowed to want things. I'm allowed to desire things, but attachment to me is being attached to it showing up in a specific form or a specific person, or on a specific timeline or whatever, especially when it involves the free will of other people, right? So non-attachment to me, reconciling non-attachment with reconciling my desire to live fully basically says, whatever the thing is that I want, it is my responsibility to create it for myself within, and then trust that I will attract the right thing showing up for me, whether that's a relationship or I went through this with my music as well. I went through this with my music production, being attached to a certain producer, for a while, that I really thought this is the one I jive with. This is what's supposed to happen, and that person ended up ghosting me and then leaving for a tour for 3 months, and it was and finding a new producer is like finding a new therapist,
Yeah.
it's so personal, especially when it comes to your art. And non-attachment for me is saying I want to put my album out, I have the desire to create, right? But I'm not going to rely on any one person or any one circumstance to have to show up for me in their free will in order for me to create the thing that I want to create. And I also understand, like you said, there's going to be human attachment. There's going to be pair bonding, right? There's going to be even just fluid bonding with a person, there are entanglements that happen. But I can recognize these things as things that are happening in my animal body and not things that are a reflection of me in my spirit. So when my breakup with my last partner happened, obviously I was grieving, it was for me, one of the deepest and most profound love experiences that I'd ever experienced in my life. It was so, at that point, there was so much emotional intimacy and there was so much soul level growth between us. It was remarkable. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And yet when the breakup happened, it was even easier for me to let that go than it was for me to let go of the toxic things that I experienced in my past when I was still in codependence, precisely because I was still in codependence, right? So even though this was the most profound and most intimate love I had experienced up until this point, I could still say, I can let you go because I know where I'm at and I know what I'm attracting. And if the fact that I am growing at a rate that you're suddenly I'm not saying this to denigrate him in any way. Literally, when we broke up, he said, "I'm not mature enough for this relationship. Like maybe in time I'll be able to step up, but I don't want to keep you, I don't want to keep you hanging on if like I don't know where it's going to go. I still have to figure out the things that I feel about love at that level, et cetera, et cetera." So letting him go was, on a spiritual level, it was quite easy, because once it was obvious, it was just like, once I knew that I was falling into that energy of convincing, then I was just like, oh no, I don't want to be convincing. So, okay. So go. If that's what you want, I don't want to hold you on to that, And then of course I saw my facilitators, I saw like my alchemist, an energy healer. And I was like, all right, guys, like pull up team. Like I got some grief to process, because my animal body is going to have those attachments exactly as you said. But my knowingness is on a different level where I know that once I process through this grief and I remove those attachments to the timeline that I had. And then of course, immediately, as soon as we broke up, the pandemic hit, and he's in Italy. So I was like, the universe actually was looking out for me. Could you imagine if I was trying to make that work when my U.S. passport isn't even going to be valid to go to, So now it's like, I look back at that, I'm like, oh, wow, that happened for a reason. Mm-hmm. And actually in a weird way, that breakup was I went through that grieving process right at the right time. Like that was actually working out in my favor in some strange way. And he and I haven't really kept in touch a lot, but I don't feel like there's space, but I don't feel like there isn't room for him to come back. If he all of a sudden quantum leaps, quantum leaps, quote unquote. But if he comes back and says, "Oh, I did that work and I'm ready now," then the question is just, does the equation fit? It's not even personal anymore. It's like, is this in alignment? I can love you and I can experience unconditional love for you. And my unconditional love for myself says this needs to be in alignment for it to work. So my practice of non-attachment is that I prioritize alignment over anything else. I prioritize true alignment and things working and being in that flow over any attachment to something that's not working, just because I think in my head that it should work a different way. So of course I feel a desire for my sacred union, right? I mean, I'm working through a whole album, like hyper sigilizing that coming into my life. And I'm terrified that I'm going to finish the album and then still be single. And like, but this is what it means to have a leap of faith, right? This is what it means to practice magic, right? The universe has shown me so much so far and has brought so much to me that I believe in it. I just believe that committing to this path is going to create that for me. So it's my commitment to myself and to me staying in my own energy and not being pulled out of my own path because I'm attached to an external circumstance or an external person that requires their free will showing up for me in a way that they're just not doing of their own accord, Mm-hmm. And I want that relationship and I want that alignment more than I want any one specific person, because I know that the person who fits into that alignment mathematically is going to be the best person, because that's how it works, right? We have this idea that people are like, oh, but if I'm not attached to this person is the best person. So therefore anything else is settling. And it's like, no. You have to break free of that paradigm that it's this or I'm settling for the person who is into me, but I'm not that into them. No. You have to imagine something that is even better, where that mutuality, that infinity symbol, that loop, right? where it's that mutual, it's that thing. And that mutuality is going to be better than anything that is not that mutuality. And so that's my idea around that.
Well said. Very well said. All of that from the very beginning. Yeah, that's really, really awesome.
Bravo.
Actually, yeah, you and I were talking about an element of what she just said last night. We were on a run and you asked me to elucidate on it. I said something about if I'm in love with a person and I'm having troubles around it, it's not connecting fully or something like that. I want to be able to be in a place where I can continue being in that space of loving and deeply committed to that love without needing the other person to agree on it and to be sort of like dependent on extrinsic forces in order to feel empowered around it, because empowerment doesn't have to do with extrinsic things so much as it has to do with aligning yourself to be responsible for the way you're directing your own life and being self-authoring, that kind of thing. So I want a love that aligns. That's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
Very good way of putting it. Gosh, this is a great conversation, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. There's a great song that kind of hit me recently. It's Love the One You're With.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the one you're with is just you. So just love that person, and then when you're with somebody else, to love that person that you're with, because if the love itself is real, then that's good enough. Just it'll take care of what needs to be taken care of, So love the one you're with, I love you too right now.
Oh, love you, Satch.
I love you both back.
And my dog who's sitting here on the couch. So
we love you, Percy.
I have headphones on, so or else her nose would be right up here looking at Uncle Carlos.
Yeah. I just got to snuggle her yesterday.
Very good.
Well, this is I think just personally speaking, a beautiful place to close for now. Unless there are
we covered a lot of ground. This is wonderful.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
It's a truly authentic, real conversation. We appreciate you for, for opening up and having a real conversation with us. I mean, we can tell that when we're in the presence of somebody who actually allows some vulnerability and speaks her truth. So this is the kind of thing we love.
Absolutely. It's been fantastic. Yeah. And, I think, we're probably going to have a nice big party when we have our 100th episode. So I think you're invited, Arden. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're invited. That'd be great.
And you won't even have to fly in unless you're happy to be doing something somewhere else. But yeah, we would love to have you. So how do people find you, for one? What's the easiest way to find you, and where are you to be found?
That is a great question. I am most active on my Facebook. If you just want to learn about my course and get some information, you can go to therepatterningproject.com, and that also has all of my social media on it. My band is Arden and the Wolves. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you can get music, basically. And then both my Twitter and my Instagram are It's Me, Arden Leigh. So ITSMEARDEN LEIGH. And I am most active on Facebook. So facebook.com / The Repatterning Project or / Arden and the Wolves are my business pages, but you can also look me up just Arden Leigh, ARDEN LEIGH, and shoot me a friend request and message me and say hi.
Great having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
You've been listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts, Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Very special thanks to our guest, Arden Leigh. My name is Oliver Alty, and I produce the show. I also wrote our theme song, which you're listening to right now. Please subscribe to The Authenticity Show wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with us on social media. Like us, follow us, all the things. And you can find our website at authenticityshow.com. Thank you for listening, and have an authentic day.